This is 100 Years of Cox. You are listening to a podcast by Frances Thompson. I'm telling the story of 10 siblings from the Machel Cox family through the letters they wrote to each other. They were born in England between 1868 and 1884. 7 of them lived in England and 3 lived abroad in the colonies. These siblings are my family. Sibling number 2, Edmund, is my great-grandfather. The 10 siblings started writing a circular letter to each other called the Family Budget in 1906. They continued for the rest of their lives, and then their children continued the stream of letters. The last poignant letter was written in 1987 by David, Arthur's son. It is now January 1908, so I've started season 2 in 100 Years of Cox. The siblings are all back in their own homes and they discuss the Christmas budget and congratulate each other. They continue to discuss nightshirts versus pyjamas, and Avice joins in, which was a bit shocking, as it was inconceivable for a lady to wear a suit of pyjamas. Edmund announces that he has a new job. He will be curate in charge of St Bartholomew's, Hallam Fields in Derbyshire, and he will stay at the same church from 1908 until the 1950s. This means he and May, who's barely been mentioned so far, can finally afford to get married after many years of being engaged. Avice has been to the theatre to see Peter Pan. Enid describes how Cyril is busy with photography and his magic lantern. And Bernard begins his letter by writing down the beginning of several other letters. Many begin with a sigh or an excuse, and he manages to embarrass his siblings. Edmund's letter. Woolly Moor, Monday, January the 6th, 1908. Dear Family B, excuses to begin with, please. Although on the list Vera states she sent off the B on December 22nd. But the postmark said the 23rd. I never even had time to even open the bee until at Long Eaton the day after Christmas Day, and since then everything seems to have been a most tremendous rush, and I really could not bring myself to send it on without enclosing a letter of some sort. It is difficult even today to find time to write, but my reputation is at stake. I suppose Avice is still at Sydenham, so I'm sending the bee to her there, and am enclosing my old letter as well for Mother to take charge of. Most of you will have heard by now that I am in a state of excitement as to my future movements. I have applied for a place at Hallam Fields, on the Long Eaton side of Ilkeston. The stipend, which is provided by the Stanton Iron Works Company, is certainly not large, but May and I consider that we should just be able to manage, as there is a good house provided, the parsonage, and a nice little bit of garden. The company also pay the rates and keep the entire house in repair, both inside and out, and also pay for coal, gas and firewood. There is also practically no anxiety about parish funds for different purposes, as the company finds the money for Sunday school treats, choir and teachers' outings, etc. If I do go there, I should expect to do so at the end of March, when I shall be leaving this house in any case. I told my vicar yesterday morning. Only this morning I received the following communication from the Stanton Iron Works Company. Dear Sir, at our board meeting yesterday, the vacancy at Hallam Fields was considered, and we hope to write to you further in a few days. I think this looks promising. Of course, I can't help it making me feel very unsettled just now, and I own that I shall be very disappointed if it comes to nothing. Some of you doubtless know that I shall be paying Enid a visit next Monday for the inside of a week, not having seen her for the last 7 years. Arthur will be the next on the list. I wonder whether I shall be married before I see him again. Surely these exclamation marks are excusable. I must acknowledge that I have not yet sent on the Christmas budget to Aldwyn, but will do so tomorrow. I really do grudge letting it go, as I keep returning to it for a kind of refresher periodically. Needless to say, I very much enjoyed it. Just a few lines about it. As a whole, its get-up is splendid, and I heartily congratulate the editor and also the contributors. The frontispiece is certainly a work of art, and I much appreciated it. The editorial is just like Bernard, therefore I need not further praise it. Mother's contribution is in her own unequalled style. I read it all. Cuthbert's song of the budget I much enjoyed, especially the verse relative to Vera. The ending to his alphabet is quite unapproachable. Arthur's phonetic ABC is, of course, by a long way the cleverest, especially his YZ and his H. His chess problems are, of course, beyond me. Father's poem is a real gem. He gets out of some of his difficulties as to metre and rhyme with the most sublime assurance, and the result is truly delightful. Father's city lunches took a long time to get through, but were most appetising all the same. I must not forget Arthur's shadow mystery. The silhouette is extremely good. I am a little puzzled over a few of his points, but his description of Avice is literally charming. I rather wonder how she will succeed in getting her own back. Perhaps she would kindly send us an illustration. Enid's prize competition is rather too difficult for me, though of course I shall have to have a shot at Bernard's. The whole of the editor's contributions were worthy of him. The family limericks were extremely funny, though I do not understand the allusion to the pump. Enid will doubtless enlighten me when I see her next week. By the way, I must confess the engineering supplement was absolutely beyond me. Is there a joke in it? Or is it meant to interest anyone? Please forgive my ignorance. I think the 6 wives should really have first prize. The ladies' page and the children's corner have been immensely enjoyed by everyone here who has either seen them or been privileged to hear a reading from the Christmas budget. Is the portrait of the editor meant to be Bernard's idea of what he will look like in the future? Please enlighten me. Enid's advertisements from the Church Times are also very good reading. Twinkle, Twinkle is quite heavenly. How much Dad must appreciate it. We all know how he feels about motor cars. I hope Arthur's advertisement will be of use to him, especially the care that we note is bestowed on the bathing arrangements. Avice's illustrations are well worthy of her. The one of our parents in bed is the best, I think. How exceedingly tidy they have kept their bed. I hope all these remarks will not be tiresome, but I wish to show my appreciation, and doubtless others will have something to say. I am extremely sorry that I have not yet had time to copy out all the quotations you have all sent. I had meant sending them with this letter, but I will see that they are sent on to Avice in a couple of days at any rate, and then they can go the rounds with the budget till they return to me again, when I will adjudicate. Avice, the photo of Vera that you mention was not in the budget when it reached me, so please don't accuse me of abducting it. I am very grieved that I was not allowed to see your illustration of Dorothy withdrawing from the bee. Bernard, what is this golf picture to which you refer? I cannot find one. It seems as if some wholesale pilfering has been going on. And this being the case, I shall have to threaten to take my share the next time I see anything I want. I wonder whether Vera is the culprit, as she has always just overhauled the contents of the bee before I receive it. Bernard, your anecdote of Miss Foster is quite delightful. I can imagine the scene. Cuthbert, I have made note of your magnificent rise in salary. I must congratulate you. I had already noted you down for the next time I am in want of subscriptions before I had read Arthur's letter. I can't think of anything especially pressing at this moment, unless it is a Christmas tree, etc., that I am having at Danesmore Church next Friday for the children, and for which I have promised small presents. I've had contributions from May and from 2 friends from Long Eaton. I should think that your Limerick master will have had a warning not to hand over any future winnings to his better half. What a ... she must be. Arthur, I am much obliged to you for solving the Anglis Redenda mystery. I had been puzzling to know what was familiar in the name, and you have saved my credit. I hope I may have something interesting to tell by the time the bee comes round to me again. Best wishes to you all for the new year. Your affectionate brother Edmund. P.S. Please excuse bad writing. I have just discovered the sketch of myself at golf as I was fastening up the bee ready for the post. I don't, as a rule, look over my old letters, and I had no idea this sketch had been added. I feel very sorry for my legs. Also, I always play golf wearing a cap. The nose and chin are, I suppose, pretty fair, but the figure is an absolute libel. I am not surprised the artist did not like to put his initials. Notes on Edmund's letter. Edmund is still living at Woolly Moor, where he is the curate. He thinks very little of his vicar, and he's very keen to get a church of his own. The Stanton Ironworks Company decided to accept him, and Edmund shortly moves to the parsonage, which used to be adjacent to St Bartholomew's Church in Hallam Fields. The Stanton Ironworks Company, which provided the funding for St Bartholomew's, closed decades ago. The M1 was built alongside, and the area has now been completely redeveloped. The church and the parsonage were just 200 metres from the huge chimneys belching out all sorts of pollutants. Ironworking was dirty and dangerous. The small terraced houses for the workers, adjacent to the church, had no indoor bathrooms. There would have been an outdoor toilet, a tub in front of the fire on a Saturday night, and allotments at the back where people grew their own veg. Edmund discovers a sketch which has been added to his old letter of him playing golf, presumably drawn by Bernard. Edmund is too busy to write a budget letter, but curiously he finds time to play golf. Edmund does not think much of the sketch and says the figure should be wearing a cap. Clearly Bernard went back to the drawing and added a cap afterwards. I will put the sketch of Edmund up on Twitter. Avice's letter. 13 Longton Avenue, January the 12th, 1908. Dear family, I suppose I must begin my budget letter, though I generally grudge the time for it when at home. I like to listen to Burr's and Vera's chatter on a Sunday. I hope you will like to hear that I have not got a suppressed cold this time. By the by, the wrong comma put in Burr's second sheet is, I think, in this sentence. The illustration of Edmund playing golf, I suppose, is, I fancy, by a new artist. The comma after golf should be left out. Of course, the illustration is by Burr. I think the features are very good. I am amused at Arthur's reference to Parnell's reference book. It certainly is a wonderful book and very useful, but Arthur has put all his faith in it, and he's quite furious if you dare to doubt any of its statements. I was very interested to see the division in the family for nightshirts and pyjamas, as put forth by Burr. I wish ladies might compete. I should like to enter under the list for pyjamas. As to my illustration of Dorothy's withdrawal, which was drawn on a small space left by Arthur for this purpose in his old letter, Edmund, I think Arthur suggested to me the idea of picturing it as a forcible ejection. It was the easiest way of illustrating, and so should not be taken literally, need I say. Is this version any better? Dorothy, so exhausted by her effort of writing for the budget that she has just told us her decision. Edmund, I took out the photo of Vera, I believe, so it is all right. I did like reading your criticism on the Xmas budget. I hope we may have many more, poor editor. The beautiful binding and general get-up of the budget surprised and pleased me so much, and I like the coloured plate very much, though I did not much at first. The fifth and last verse of the song of the budget are very good, I think. The phonetic alphabet is awfully clever, and of course Vera's frontispiece is awfully good, so nice to have one to remind us of Studland. The family Limericks is the most amusing thing in the bee, I think. I object to the damsel of Stoke one, as the rhyming word soak is so horrid. Please use Burr's Luckham Limerick, if there must be one describing myself. I think Neville's, Vera's and Aldwin's are splendid. M, Q, T, V and Z are very good in Cuthbert's alphabet. I think Edmund's is awfully good too. Sydenham carolling sounds very fine when read aloud. Father describes the carol singers awfully well. The ladies' page is beautiful. I did enjoy it. I am having delightful holidays here in Sydenham and enjoying some jolly good hockey, after the mixed hockey I was playing at Devonport. I've also been to the theatre to see Peter Pan again. It is most enchanting, and you should all go and see it. I enjoyed our second whist party best. I had delightful presents at Christmas, and I have suppressed all colds. Goodbye. Yours affectionately, Avice. Notes on Avice's letter. If you are not keeping up, Dorothy is married to Arthur, sibling number 3, who was the headmaster of Garfield House Prep School in Plymouth. Dorothy decided to drop out of the budget, as she didn't always feel like writing a letter, but she was then told off by the siblings for only writing 1 page, or for keeping the budget for longer than a week. Avice drew a pen and ink sketch, an imagined version of the sad scenario. I will put it on Twitter. You can look it up at Cox Letters. Dorothy has taken to her bed, exhausted due to letter writing. The siblings gather sadly round her bed, and Avice and Vera are in floods of tears. It is a quaint little drawing, and another example of how the early 1900s was so much simpler than our modern world. The siblings loved going to the theatre. Avice describes going to see Peter Pan again, saying it was enchanting. The 1904 play was called Peter Pan, or The Boy Who Wouldn't Grow Up. It was first staged in London in 1904 at the Duke of York Theatre and was hugely popular. I will put an image up on Twitter. In 1906, JM Barrie published his book Peter Pan in Kensington Gardens, and in 1911 came the book Peter and Wendy. I think it is fascinating that these were adults going to watch Peter Pan at the theatre. They weren't taking children with them. The stories were a delightful imaginary escapism, based around the familiar scenario of a large London house, an Edwardian absent mother, children being brought up by a nursemaid, and outings to Kensington Gardens. JM Barrie had a runaway success. Other interesting facts. The girl's name Wendy became popular specifically due to Peter Pan. And in 1929, JM Barrie gave the Peter Pan copyright to Great Ormond Street Children's Hospital, which continues to benefit financially today due to that gift. Enid's letter, 187 Lodge Lane, Liverpool, January 19th, 1908. Dear family, I have been very much afraid that I should keep the budget over time, but I am going to make a great effort and try to get it off today. I have been very busy for the last month, as it is the children's holidays, and in addition I have had the house quite full. Mrs. Isles and Mildred were with us for Christmas, and then Cuthbert and Edmund came. Do you know, it is nearly 7 years since I last saw Edmund, and I hope it won't be so long again. I think we agreed that he has got thinner and I have got fatter. Edmund is, at present, very keen on getting a curacy in charge at Hallam Fields in Derbyshire, as he thinks he would then be able to get married. But I am sure it could only be done with the most rigid economy. However, something will certainly be settled very shortly. If he gets Hallam Fields, he hopes to get married in April. It is a long time since we have had a wedding in the family. I wonder who will be the next to follow his example. I hope you have all enjoyed the quotation book as much as we did here in Liverpool. Many thanks to Edmund for all his trouble in collecting the quotations and writing them all out. Some of the quotations are really splendid. The one for Avice, "Kiss me and be quiet," is lovely. So is the one all about drugs and medicine, describing Mother so accurately in my opinion. I only wish everyone had sent in extracts. The pump is certainly a success in the main, and many orders are being received for it. 50 have been sent out to India, and it has only been on the market since May, so the directors are very pleased with prospects for the future. Cyril is longing for £150 with which to make photography experiments. He has made several lantern slides for our new toy, a magic lantern, lighted by our ordinary drawing room electric light, and we had an exhibition for Edmund and Cuthbert's benefit. At present he has had no time to attempt coloured photography, but as he had all the outfit and various plates given him for Christmas, he hopes to make a start soon. It is very expensive, as a packet of 4 quarter plates cost 4 shillings and 6pence. Cuthbert's experiences at the dentist have not spoilt his good looks, but his face is now decidedly thinner and can hardly be described as one of broad-blown comeliness, a description, by the way, that he decidedly resented. I have not been out to many evening entertainments, as I am still trying to take life quietly, although I am really much recovered now. However, I did a most dreadful thing just before Christmas. We were invited out to dinner on a Friday. We accepted, but I got it into my head that it was on a Saturday, and consequently I told Cyril so. The day arrived. We sat quietly at home, quite unconscious of the torture to which we were putting our would-be hostess. On Saturday night, I was just going up to dress for dinner when I discovered an entry on my engagement tablet, and I saw that the dinner was put down for Friday. At once, I sent round a maid to the house to inquire which was the correct date, and was then told that the dinner party had taken place the night before, that they had waited half an hour for us, and had then given us up. You can imagine my horror at my dreadful mistake. Owen returns to Rugby on the 22nd of January. He is going into the upper school and will be in the lower 5th, and consequently he will have no more fagging. but he will not have a study to himself until his 6th term, nor will he be allowed to make toast for himself until his 7th term. These regulations are most quaint. Owen is very young for his age, but at the same time he is anxious to be confirmed. Cyril has written to Dr. James about it, but it is not settled yet. Bernard, the Christmas budget was really a thing of beauty and a joy forever. You have no idea how I grudged parting with it. I am afraid it must have cost you a great deal. Your contributions were first rate, and so was Arthur's phonetic alphabet, Cuthbert's song of the budget, and Vera's frontispiece. But we enjoyed everything in it, from cover to cover. I am much disappointed, Bernard, that you don't care for the book Awakening of Bittlesham. I thought it was a very good book, and Cuthbert is now my sole remaining hope, as he says he intends to read it. As a rule, I cannot manage Joseph Conrad's books, though I see their cleverness, so I shall not tackle The Secret Agent unless it gets further positive votes from the budget members. In the great question of nightshirts versus pyjamas, Owen's vote for pyjamas will again equalise matters, 5 votes aside, if Burr remains faithful to nighties. The list now reads thus: nightshirts, Father, Cyril, Edmund, Arthur and Bernard. Pyjamas, Neville, Wilfrid, Aldwyn, Cuthbert and Owen. It is curious to note that the voting is practically seniors versus juniors. Burr is the only intruder in the aged division. Arthur must have a big stock of nightshirts if he can change them at the rate of 3 a night. Avice, I agree with you about the comma in Bernard's letter. I declare that it is not necessary. Sadly, I have not yet received any solutions of my prize competition in the budget. I quite expect that there will be some ties for the first place. If so, I will set a further competition. The present one was meant to be very easy. The answers are all well known and should not need much looking up in any encyclopedia or atlas. Edmund was doing it while he was here, and he was much disgusted that we had no encyclopedia in this house. With love to you all, yours affectionately, Enid. Notes on Enid's letter. Edmund asked everyone to find quotations from poems which accurately described the family characteristics. He then compiled a quotation book which humorously described the various family members, and it was posted round to everyone, but it's sadly been lost. Enid had an engagement tablet. I presume this was some sort of diary in which the engagements of the day were written down, but I really have no idea. Interesting that she describes it as an engagement tablet. And also, she sends round a maid to the house to check the details of the dinner party. She doesn't send the maid. Enid and Cyril were wealthy, and they clearly employed several servants who would probably have lived in the attic rooms of their house in Liverpool. Mind you, we know they were wealthy, as Cyril was dabbling in colour photography in 1908, which was clearly an expensive hobby. Cyril had his own dark room, and he's been given all the necessary equipment as Christmas presents. Enid is describing the quarter-size glass negative plates that Cyril uses for photography. If you've never heard of a magic lantern, it was a very early version of a slide projector that older listeners may remember. Younger generations will have no idea what I'm talking about. Cyril would have printed slides from his photographs and then entertained friends and family to a lantern show in the drawing room. None of the family have yet sent in answers to Enid's prize competition, where all the answers come from the word hospitable. Enid said it was quite an easy competition. Easy, Not sure about that. Some of the easier questions I've got the answer to. A heroine from Shakespeare, a European mountain range, an Italian town, and a Swiss town. See if you can work any of them out, and please do contact me with some answers. Answers are all from the word hospitable. If you are on Twitter, I've just posted Enid's 21 questions there. Please work out some of the answers and tell me. I've only got 9 answers so far. @CoxLetters on Twitter. And nightshirts versus pyjamas. What a great conversation to be having by letter. I hadn't realised that nighty was the abbreviation of the word nightshirt. To us today, it sounds quite odd to describe a man wearing a nightie. Clearly it was quite normal in 1908. 5 of the family favour nightshirts and 5 favour pyjamas. Stay tuned, the discussion continues. Bernard's letter. Sydenham, January 26th, 1908. Dear Budget, I think it is very astonishing and praiseworthy that the Budget continues its rounds. Everybody begins their letter with a sigh or an excuse. For instance, Cuthbert wrote, "Rather unfortunately, the Budget has come at the very busiest time of year." Arthur started, "Were I to rewrite the story of Tantalus, etc." Vera said, "This is going to be a short and uninteresting letter because there are so many things to do." Edmund wrote, "Excuses to begin with, please. I never even had time to open the Budget." Avice, "I suppose I must begin my Budget letter, though I generally grudge the time for it when I am at home." Enid said, "I have been very much afraid that I should keep the Budget over time." Well, family, I've completed 1 page of my letter anyhow. We were all right about Caldwell and Miss Robinson being first-class liars. The accounts in the newspapers are fearfully interesting. It is a pity that Arthur's and Cuthbert's theories about the Druce Portland case have been upset. They were much more interesting than my theory, which was correct. And I must state, I wrote my theory before they decided to open the grave. Cuthbert, what a curious selection your Berkhamsted Literary Society made. I shall be interested to hear what books you read this term. If you must set competitions from my Budget letter, please see who can find the largest number of grammatical errors in this letter. Arthur, I am glad you are getting so many Athenaeum books for review. I hope you will continue to review them honestly. Otherwise you may bring down on your head the objurgations of the Marie Corellis and Hall Caines of the naturalist world. Edmund, I am very glad to hear that you have got the living at Hallam Fields. I already hear wedding bells. Nearly 16 years since Enid's wedding and 10 since Arthur's. I am sure Arthur won't grudge me an exclamation mark here. With regard to the Christmas Budget, I hear that Cuthbert has solved one of Arthur's chess problems but can't yet manage the other one. I will send the solution to anyone who wants it and can't work it out for him or herself. I haven't tried Arthur's chess problems yet. It doesn't look like a position that could be arrived at during an ordinary game of chess. I have had answers to my Everyman's Library competition from Enid, Cuthbert, Mother and Vera, and I await replies from Arthur, Avice and Edmund, not to speak of the foreign brothers, as Mother, who is a real little Englander, will insist on calling them. Edmund, you will have learned all about the pump and the engineering supplement, as you have been to Liverpool by now. Avice, I agree with you about Arthur and the Parnell's reference book. I dipped into it when I was at Devonport. It interested me exceedingly. However, I must risk Arthur's fury and question one of its statements. A lady called here when no one was at home, and she left a calling card with one corner turned up. Mother says this meant that the lady had called in person, rather than her maid calling, and Vera corroborates this and says a turned-up corner also meant this at Devonport. Parnell's reference book says a turned-up corner means that she is calling for herself and her daughter. What do you say, Enid and Avice? The quotation book was very amusing and was greatly enjoyed by the Sydenham household. Please send it home again, Edmund, when it comes back to you, as we should like to see all the comments. Poor Enid, I was so sorry for you mistaking the date of the dinner party. If I was Owen, I should feel very strongly tempted to make toast for myself at Rugby. What would happen if he did? Please ask him to do it and see. I would dearly like to know. It would be rather exciting if nightshirts and pyjamas could have a tournament and take each other on at various games, indoors and out, say cricket, football, tennis, hockey, billiards, bridge, croquet, whist, chess, etc. Not, however, in costume, of course. Vera and I went to a progressive whist last week, which was run on different lines to the usual. Each table represented a country, both couples playing for their country. For instance, one couple at the England table would defend and be attacked by a couple from the German table. At the same time, the other English couple would be attacking France or Russia at the French or Russian table. Each table had a little castle in which was stuck a large flag to show the country, and was also provided with a little box of flags. A winning couple would take a flag from the losing couple and stick it in their own castle. The table which had the most captured flags at the end of 24 deals were the winners, and each of the 4 people at that table received a prize. Of course, it had to be planned out beforehand where each couple went at each deal, and there was a great deal of moving about. It was quite interesting to see what your other couple were doing, and quite consoling to find them winning if you were doing badly. You kept the same partner for 12 deals, and then the 2 men at each table changed ladies for the remaining 12, so that the same 4 people represented the same country all through. It made quite an amusing variation, and Vera and I greatly enjoyed the evening. By the way, I have the original manuscript of the Christmas budget, if anyone would like it. Not all the original manuscript, I am afraid, as some wanted rewriting. It is also all on loose bits of paper, and is minus the illustrations. I have been staying at Wimbledon with the aunts for 2 nights this week. They are both well, though Auntie Catty's rheumatism was bothering her, and she is now rather deaf. They were most interested in Edmund's news and his new situation, and I expatiated on the fact that he has no furniture. I am suffering from a cold, which I am trying in vain to suppress. How do you manage it, Avice? Yours also, Bernard. P.S. I thought you all might also like this quotation. She hit him with a shingle, which made his breeches tingle, because he pinched his little baby brother. And he ran down the lane with his pants full of pain. Oh, a boy's best friend is his mother. Extract from the younger set by R.W. Chambers. Does anyone know the chorus? Notes on Bernard's letter. The idea of calling cards has now completely disappeared, although business cards have replaced them to some extent. In the early 1900s in England, calling cards were popular, but the appropriate etiquette was essential. Calling cards only worked if you were wealthy enough to employ a maid to open the front door, so they were only used by aristocrats, the upper classes, and the wealthy middle classes. Bernard asks about the practice of turning up a corner of the card to indicate that the caller had visited in person, rather than a servant leaving a calling card at a house on behalf of their employer. Complicated stuff, and hard for us to imagine today. The siblings will discuss this subject a great deal in the coming letters, as most of them used calling cards, and they all had an opinion to share. The Druce Portland court case was finally finished with in January 1908, with the coffin of Mr. Druce being exhumed and opened. The body inside was clearly Mr. Druce and not the Duke of Portland. As Bernard says in his letter, "We were quite right. Caldwell and Miss Robinson are first-class liars." I will put some images on Twitter. It is quite a fascinating story if you want to read more about it online. Cuthbert's letter. Number 2, Chapel Street, Berkhamsted, 4th of February 1908. Dear family, bang goes sixpence right into the missionary box. I must begin with my heartiest congratulations to Edmund on his preferment. They kept him waiting a long time in suspense, but all's well, etc. He must let mother know what he wants in the way of wedding presents. I need hardly say how much I enjoyed the Christmas budget, every item of it. I give the palm to father's carol and Bernard's 6 wives. Bernard's limerick on me has been enormously appreciated by my fellow masters here. The quotation book was most successful, and I did enjoy reading it. I feel very sorry now that I sent none in, but I'm collecting some to send to Edmund for the next edition, and I hear that Arthur is as well. I have found a really rude one to describe myself. By the way, I call on Bernard and others for an explanation of broad blown. I doubt they understanding its meaning properly. I am shocked once more, and not by Aldwyn this time, but by our sister Avice, with her intrusion into the discussion that is rousing so much feeling among the males. However, that she may have her wish, as expressed in her last letter, I am sending her herewith an old suit of my pyjamas. Your quotation from the younger set, Bernard, is most typical of American vulgarity. It is even worse than the lyrics in The Girl from Up There, an American comic opera I once had the misfortune to hear. What with the San Francisco business, the Thor trial, etc., I think the United States of Gehenna is a good description for this cesspool of the world. You see, I am my father's son, but all that is worst in English life seems to be coming from America, via Pearson and others. Roosevelt's last message to Congress could not very well have been stronger. The school has increased some 20-odd boys this term. My own form has been increased to 22 due to promotions. One of my new boys is a Gregorowski, son of the famous judge, who is now a member of the upper house in the Transvaal. We were talking about South African affairs the other morning, and one of my boys did not know what the Jameson raid was. So I got the young boy to tell us, and it was rather interesting. I have another South African boy, Versfeld, in my form. He is English, from the Transvaal, I think. We have this term got a small Spaniard, who did not know a word of English when he first came, though he is now picking it up wonderfully. There is an association of Spanish gentlemen who, despairing of education in Spain, have determined to have their sons educated at an English public school and then a German university, and then they are to return to Spain and regenerate their own country. They sent a representative over here to find out particulars, with the result that the first boy is now at the schoolhouse, and unless he is a failure, He will be followed by half a dozen or more boys next year. They want to come at the age of 11 and stop for 6 or 7 years. It is an interesting experiment brought about by the admiration the Spanish have for their queen. I must say a little about books before I finish. Your dear brother, Cuthbert. Notes on Cuthbert's letter. All the siblings wrote loads about the books they've read, but I haven't included any of their book reviews this time. They all read a great deal. Some of them paid subscriptions to a library, and some of them were wealthy enough to buy books, which were very expensive in the early 1900s. There would also have been quite a bit of sharing books between them to save having to buy new copies. But their father, Dr. Cox, was an author, and he encouraged his children to read. All the siblings loved Bernard's family limericks, except Avice, who didn't like the one about her. Cuthbert says his fellow Berkhamsted schoolmasters greatly appreciated the limerick that Bernard wrote about Cuthbert. To finish off this podcast, I'm going to read Bernard's limericks again. Written by Bernard about his 9 siblings in November 1907. Enid. A lady who lived in Lodge Lane had a spouse with a number 1 brain. She was very much moved when the pump really proved to be a success in the main. Edmund. A curate who went to Clay Cross had 3 little hamlets to boss. He set the pace quicker and routed the vicar, who I fear was not much of a loss. Arthur. A Devonport pedagogue said, "This sleeplessness makes me half dead. A mattress of hair to purchase I'll dare. A saint should rejoice in his bed." Neville, a man of the CSAR, returned to the Transvaal afar, where his gold-rimmed pince nez and his curly toupee were thought just a trifle bizarre. Wilfrid, an Englishman out in the West, in scholastic authority dressed, remarked to his school, "Do you think I'm a fool?" They replied, "If you please, you know best." Bernard. There was a young man of 13, Longton Avenue, Sydenham, I mean, who thought he could edit this budget with credit, but this remains to be seen. Aldwyn. The parson who bossed Kota had a laugh like the toot of a motor. When they cried, "You exceed the limit of speed," he merely walked on with some hauteur. Cuthbert. A Berkhamsted master once went to public school's camp with a rent in the seat of his what? So he patched up the spot with a piece from the inside of a tent. Avice. An obstinate damsel of Stoke kept one of her fingers in soak. When they said, "Take it out," she replied with a pout, "It's really quite short. I shan't choke." Vera. There was a young lady of Kent whose shoulders were very much bent. When they said, "Oh, my dear," she replied with a sneer, "Oh, rot, I play hockey for Kent." In the next episode of 100 Years of Cox, Arthur describes an amusing incident where he went out to a dinner party, accidentally wearing 1 brown boot and 1 black boot. Avice was in convulsions, she was so embarrassed. There was a bishop there too, and poor Arthur didn't realise his error of etiquette all evening. Edmund is off to Hallam Fields parsonage, and he is choosing new wallpaper. Avice is hunting for a new cook for Garfield House School. She doesn't find it easy interviewing new servants, and she declares that Cuthbert's pyjamas are most uncomfortable. And Bernard describes Vera's appearance as an international, playing hockey for England on Wednesday 18th of March 1908 at Richmond. Bernard describes the scarlet skirts that the players wore, the excellent stick work, and the second-rate tea which was served to them afterwards. 100 Years of Cox. The Machel Cox budget letters and all content is subject to copyright and belongs to both myself and the Bodleian Library in Oxford. Machel Cox Letters is on Twitter @CoxLetters. If you have any questions or you want to tell me something, please send me an email, machelcoxletters@gmail.com. You have been listening to 100 Years of Cox. Thank you for listening.